see your mother. You were only given one. Go see your mother. And you know that you will never have another. Go see your mother. Go see your mom.
Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and my mother is right here. Hi, how's it going? Good to be on the show. Hey, how's it going, Emma?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. I was looking at some of my suggestions for tonight that I had listed. One was about the way that people koshered their meat before stores would do it for you.
Interesting.
Yes.
I kosher my meat ever so often, usually like before I go to sleep or just sometimes in the shower, but that's fine. Let's see.
Excuse me.
I had a few other
a G-rated podcast.
It is. We're talking about koshering. I don't know what are you implying. I also want to talk about the army barrack World War II stories that your father would tell you guys. I want to talk about that. So let's talk about koshering the meat. I know your mother used to kosher meats, and they used to just get all this kosher salt and just pour it in the giant tub or something, and they would just kosher.
Yeah, in those days, stores, you couldn't buy your meat already kosher. You had to kosher it yourself. And I remember I took when I was getting bas mitzvah at the Philip, they had in bas mitzvah classes we were taught how to kosher meat, and it's I keep forgetting you I think soak it a half hour, then you salt it an hour, and then you rinse it off, if I'm not mistaken. Soak it in cold water for I think about an hour. Salt it. It was half hour. I keep getting it mixed up. It's half hour soaking, hour salting. I think it's half hour soaking, hour salting, and then rinse off.
Interesting.
And you have to put it on a drain board that on an angle so that the blood goes down, like drains off from the meat.
So what I know is that you soak the meats in cold water for 30 minutes. You rinse the meat thoroughly with cold salt. You cover the meat with a thin layer of coarse salt on all sides.
Right.
And then you let it sit for at least an hour. Then you rinse again like 3 times. Then you dry it. That's what I was told.
Okay, I think that sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah. So back to, I guess, World War II story is something a little more interesting.
When people used to kosher their own meat.
So you had other topics you wanted to discuss, or you because I was hoping we could really dive into what we tried to dive into last week about some World War II stories that your father used to tell you guys that you never told us.
Well, let's see. My father, thank God, didn't see real hard, serious action because he failed out of gunnery school. He had excellent eyesight, but the problem was hand-eye coordination.
Okay.
I think it was from all those beatings his father gave him over the head.
Shkaka prata. See, it works out. Beat your children. That's what happens. It's good for them.
So, but my father told me that when he saw the list, when the list was posted about, the names of the young men who had been rejected as gunners, being sent to the front, he and the men that were rejected actually started crying. They were very upset. He says until 2 months later, when they got back the list of the men who had been shot down and killed.
Wow.
And it was every single person in their class. They were the only ones that survived, the ones that got rejected.
Yeah, I feel like that World War II is just a wave of dead bodies against dead bodies.
But so funny when you look at, there's something I remember us going to the Civil War Museum and being shocked to see that evidently the Civil War claimed more deaths than World War II.
It claimed more American deaths as Americans are fighting Americans.
It was also something too because they said that they had used Revolutionary War tactics, like formally coming to a battlefield and fighting, like in formation and everything, but that the gunnery, the rifles and the war machinery was more sophisticated by the time of the Civil War than from the Revolutionary War. And here they were using old techniques with weaponry that was a lot more sophisticated.
It's similar to, World War One, where people were just trying out new ways to kill each other. And then that's when they had like all this mustard gas and all these like, barbed wire, and then they started doing flamethrowers, and flamethrowers continued on into World War II. You're just more efficient ways to kill people, But were there you were originally talking about a story about your dad was telling you about a Frenchman they were with, in the barracks?
No, he wasn't a Frenchman. He was just a regular American. And he was the alcoholic.
I guess.
He was the one that he would take anything liquid, whether it be shaving cream or shampoo, put a match to it, and if it burned, it meant it had alcohol in it, and he would consume it.
Gosh, yeah, that's literally called an alcoholic.
Yeah, I think we already went to the story about my father and his alligator. Did we do that before?
We talked about that. We talked about that. I'm
the
trying to
alligator.
dive more into, because here's the thing, I'm trying to dive more into like other stories of your youth or your familiarity with the Baltimore from community growing up, what you remember and the people that you spoke with or you would socialize with, trying to get all that on memory and record it. That's kind of like the other sub goal that I'm trying to do, but I'm also just trying to have fun and just talk to you. That's kind of how the whole thing is. It just, I the whole thing started when Tati passed away, but like, I just enjoyed our conversations, and I felt like, I want to keep them as an archive. So they're just
over Simchas Torah. I met one of our fans.
Yeah.
I'm here in New York, and he told me what he liked about our podcast was when we actually talk about like history and going back in time and what it was like in the 50s and 60s. And he said he found that more enjoyable than hearing my political views.
Yeah, no one likes them, Ima. No one likes political views. That's why I don't talk about them on my on the podcast. I try to avoid it because it's just silliness, just pure raw silliness.
The politicians are going to do what the politicians want to do.
It is what it is. I'm not here to talk about it. It's just because it's too divisive, and it's non-productive.
Yes. Well, I know. I got to tell you, your father and I moved to Florida so that we could live in freedom as conservative Republicans.
I'm glad.
How are you doing in the oppressed state of Maryland?
I'm glad that women could kill their babies now. So that's fantastic. No,
a little late for me. Oh, excuse me.
It's never too late, Emo. What are you talking about? I always think of like back in the day, like parenting, obviously when you were a kid.
It's amazing how you go from abortion to parenting.
Yeah. Speaking of dead kids,
by the way, if you go into the stores when you go shopping, the feminine the birth control products are right across the aisle from the baby products.
Interesting.
It doesn't.
A little too late.
That makes sense.
So back with what I was trying to talk about, trying to reel you into the main part of the conversation. I was thinking of your boomer reaction from the great generation's way of parenting, and now the millennial reaction to the boomer reaction.
Well, actually, there's more. I found when I was growing up, there was especially in high school, there was a lot of discussion about what was called the generation gap. There was a tremendous.
Yes, we've talked about that.
Yeah,
we've talked about that.
There's, quite honestly, I think there's much less of a generation gap between my generation and yours. I really do. Because we already, by the time we became parents, the idea of nonviolent parenting was already under discussion. Whereas in my mother's day, if you were to discuss nonviolent parenting, most parents during the 50s and early 60s would react by saying, "Nonsense! Just give the kid a slap." I'm not kidding. Whenever you tried to discuss about nonviolent parenting and reasoning with your child and communicating with your child, it was like, "What are you talking about? Talking doesn't do any good. Just give a kid a slap. That's all you gotta do." It wasn't the attitude wasn't even there. But with my generation, at least by the time we were parents, the attitude towards getting away from corporal punishment was already under starting to be accepted by my generation. In other words, the discussion was already open. Whereas in my parents' generation, I'm not going to say what they wouldn't. They would say these psychologists are all crazy. Just give the kid a slap. It was, many of them weren't even up to the discussion.
So my question, I guess, with parenting, and I think about it more of like were there any role models that you had that you tried to emulate when you were parenting us?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think. Actually, I couldn't look to I couldn't look to my parents' generation for role models in parenting, or my grandparents' generation. But I saw basically, like, around the neighborhood and among my friends. One of my friends was the mother of a couple of special needs kids, and I noticed the way she was handling this one. It wasn't even her child; it was a child in our neighborhood who was having some sort of problem, and she very patiently listened to this kid to find out what was bothering him and what he needed, very patiently. And when I saw it, I thought, that's really the way to go. Like, sit, listen, try to, you know, try to meet their, basically their, like, be more patient. Like, in my day, there was no patience. Like, I remember a couple of times, like, you know, fidgeting with things or something, and just, or being told to put down something, and my hand-eye coordination and also even today, my processing is not good. Like, if someone tells me to do something, my brain doesn't think quickly. And in other words, when I was a kid, someone say, put down something. Instead of putting it down right away, it was like, I had to think, put down here, there, where should I put it down? And by that time, the person would lose patience, come over and just yank it out of my hand, type thing. And I told you about my father's bar mitzvah,
Yes.
following directions when that man told him to close the curtain of the Aron HaKodesh. And the man just walked over and just grabbed just in a nasty way, just grabbed the curtain strings out of his hand and just closed it himself. I took that honor away from my father. There was no patience for kids that didn't follow too quickly or that weren't on the ball. And one time I was in the Department of Motor Vehicles with Etty and Khani when they were little. And I was waiting, I think I had to renew my license. And I ran into one of my old professors from Towson who taught music education, techniques of music education. And we were talking, and Etty picked up, she was little, she picked up my license, but she picked up something that I needed. And I said, you found that. Thank you so much. And I put out my hand, she put it in my hand. And the professor was really impressed. He goes, wow. He says, you handled that so well. He says, anybody else would have just said, give that to me, and yanked it out of the kid's hand. He said, but you came over and said, thank you, I'm glad you found that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about that, where, next generation after the next generation, people develop more and more patience, because nowadays they're really honing in on that concept of having patience with your children, sitting with your children, working with your children. I kind of disagree with it just a little bit, because I feel like they're going too far along this line of like legitimizing someone's crappy behavior.
I agree. Totally. I mean,
think
I've seen parents like that. You can't, there's got to be a balance. You can't, it doesn't, just because you're listening to your child and just because you're establishing a rapport for your child, doesn't mean you accept poor behavior. No, there's got to be consequences for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm noticing with some people, there's natural consequences because people just don't want to hang out with them. You want your kids to be likable. You want your kids to want to hang out with people. And if you don't raise your kid in a way that they can go ahead and be likable, then it winds up being a situation where the kid gets ostracized, and that's a whole other issue. Out of curiosity, what would be something you wish you'd known when you were my age?
How to make more money.
How to make more money. It's cute. And do you know the answer now, or you're still nothing? You're just useless. Okay. I see how this is. Life's a crapshoot. Whatever.
Besides, well, there are also, you know, different people have different goals in life. And I guess I chose a higher moral standard. In other words, you can, something just because you're making a lot of money doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. I mean, you can launder money for the mob and make a lot of money. Like someone you knew.
Whatever. There's no evidence of it.
You can make less money, but have, at least you're making it in an honest way. Sometimes, what was that? Darn it. I was listening to, Rabbi Gordon, and he was talking about his bar mitzvah portion. His bar mitzvah portion, I think, was I forgot when he said it was something it was a speech his father made as his bar mitzvah portion, like, right, how when one of Abraham's tests, it was in this week's parsha in Lech Lecha, that Hashem promised him, I'm going to make you wealthy, I'm going to make you great, and then right after that, he runs into a horrible famine where he's destitute, he has nothing, and he has to go down to Egypt with his wife and his, and with his wife, and he has to go down to Egypt and to basically to try to get food or try to get money or food, whatever. And he said how people laughed at him. They said, here you believe in this one God, and look at you, what has this one God done for you? He just made you poor, and they would just like laugh at him. Then he went down to Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, he he became very rich, and when he came back, he stayed at the same hotels that he stayed coming down, and to pay back his debts, because the way he went down to Mitzrayim, since he had no money, was on credit. So he came back to repay the credit, and people saw how rich he was. It was like, wow, maybe we were wrong. So I was thinking about Rashi says that we learned from this that Hakaras Tov, that when you go someplace and you stay by certain people, coming back you should visit the same people to like do a Hakaras Tov. So Rabbi Gordon said his father drew the analogy at the time that Rabbi Gordon was going to his bar mitzvah. Rabbi Gordon and I are contemporaries. We not in minds, you greater mind than me, no. But obviously we about the same age. We're about the same age. We were raised during the same time. One of the problems I remember during the 50s and 60s, and one of the problems that your father and I had as Bali Tshuva, was this very thing, was that people weren't working on Shabbos. People didn't work on Yom Tovim. And there were many from people who, especially during the 1930s, during the Depression, it was a very big Mesiras Nefesh for a lot of from people to stick by their guns and to say, I'm not going to work on Shabbos, I'm not going to work Yom Tov. And people like laughed at them. Look how poor you are. Look how, look how you don't have the latest car, look how poor you're living. And here you're supposed to be doing the right thing. And your father and I, we got that too, with a lot of our non-religious relatives who, of course, were, financially much better off than we were. And it was like, here, you're having all these kids, and you're not working on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and just look at you, you're just schleppers. But his father was saying that what Abraham was showing, that if you hold by your values and you don't give up on them, that it might not happen tomorrow, it might not happen the next day, but eventually, as the years go on, eventually it will happen that God will come through. And I found that God comes through, sometimes materially. I've seen a lot of from people who, as they got older, kind of hard, did very, very well financially. Things did work out. But sometimes God comes through in ways that are not material, like people talking to you, people looking at you, people recognize, here is somebody who's definitely on a higher spiritual level. Here is somebody who obviously through their behavior is more refined, or is more of a sensitive human being or a more spiritual human being. People pick up on this.
Yeah, you're right.
But
You're right.
it does, that does, like Abraham, that had that test of poverty after God promised him great wealth. Um, it's a test for a lot of us who are trying to hold by our values.
Yeah. It's funny because, you ever ask yourself if you had no limitations with all the money and like time responsibility, what really would you do anyways? You know? Like if
What do
you
you mean?
if you woke up tomorrow with no limitations, like with no money, all the time, no responsibility, like what would you do? What would you spend your day doing?
I would try to work and volunteer in philanthropic ways. Look for, try to establish, say, more Jewish schools, scholarships for low income Jewish kids. There's a tremendous need. One of the tremendous needs that we have now in the Jewish community is we have a lot of Jewish kids who they're not extreme, they don't have extreme special needs. They have normal intelligence, so they're not, they don't have extreme special needs, say like a child that might be Down syndrome, but they have issues, they have learning issues and emotional issues that really require a smaller classroom and more attention and different learning techniques. And a lot of these kids, want to go to Jewish schools, but they can't make it in the standardized Jewish schools that are available. And in order for them to make it, their parents have to hire shadows, their parents have to hire therapists, and a lot of it is out of pocket. I've met a lot of Jewish parents like this who financially just could not provide them with the private services they needed to stay in the Jewish schools and have had to take them out and put them in the public schools. And these Jewish kids hate it. They really honestly want to be in a Jewish setting.
I mean, that is the frustration.
We really need Jewish schools like that.
I mean,
And with reduced tuition or with, with scholarships to enable these parents to send their kids to these schools.
all right, just making sure I can actually talk. So, I agree with that, and that's where there's such a frustration. And I was having a conversation with my sister-in-law's kids because they were trying to understand the schooling system here in Baltimore because they don't go to the schools here, and they were trying to understand why a school would make rules for you outside of school. Like you can't go to hangout spots, you can't do certain things over the weekend. And I was very facetious about it, but I said it flat out, and this is what I felt since I was a teenager, that it's for lazy parents who don't want to, parent their kids. So they put all the blame on the school and say, "Oh, you can't go out. The school says so," instead of them just telling them like, "No, I don't want you in it," or just get over yourself. It's fine. They're gonna be at Tove Pizza. They're gonna meet a boy. It's fine. They're not gonna get pregnant tomorrow. Like, calm down.
Yeah.
But I think that's the other thing. I think a lot of parts of the front community that really bother me is that they need to calm down. They need to chill out, and they don't want to hear that because you say chill out, they have a whole panic attack, thinking that like you're gonna go have pork the next day, and they go ahead and just pick up a prostitute. No, I was only
a couple funny things that happened. One of your sisters got called into the office once, and when she was in middle school, and the principal said to her, "You were seen at a bas mitzvah gathering on Shabbos in a very short skirt." And she looked at him and said, "Why are you listening to Lashon Hara?" And then there was one time I get a call. One of your sisters was in bed sick with the flu. I get a call, and this man says to me, "Mrs. Angster, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your daughter was seen a few minutes ago at an NCSY gathering, holding hands with a boy." And I said, "Well, that would certainly be a very interesting trick because she's upstairs in bed in her room sick with the flu." And he goes, "What?" I go, "Yeah."
these kinds of things really irk me where it's like that's the part of the community that I really don't like, where it's like it's none of your business. It's none of your business. Who cares? Like I think I mentioned this once in the podcast. It's just so dumb. I have a friend of mine who was so scared about her reputation for so many years. Like I knew her in elementary school and in middle school and high school and then seminary and then post-seminary and then college. And she was always worried about her reputation, even though she would want to hang out with us and do stuff and do things. She was so scared. She just didn't do anything. And then she stayed single till she was, in her 30s. And then eventually, found somebody, got married. And the person didn't care about her reputation, didn't care about anything else, was just happy to be with her. And all of her worries and whatnot were just for naught. It was just a waste of time. And it's just like I have a kid now in the community where it's just like I'm going to watch him grow up, and I'm like, I don't mind him doing certain things, but I'm going to get a phone call or I'm going to have to walk into the principal's office, and they're going to give me a whole long speech about how the language the kid used or they were caught doing something. That I'm like, what? Who cares? And I have to play along with this baloney because I don't make enough money to go ahead and buy them out. That's going to bother me.
I remember I used to say to you guys, remember I raised you with the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I like, unless a miracle happens and I will win the lottery, I could just buy out a school board and do whatever I want. But, I'm not some other people that I knew, growing up, or I don't live in Yeshiva Lane where, I can go ahead and use that as an excuse and deal with all those,
Sometimes I wonder, like we were discussing about some of the standards that some of the Jewish schools place on their young teenagers, which are very, very unrealistic for for an active, healthy teenager that's growing up. And I think it is the answer hit me, and I think you touched on it. It's the egos of the parents and the administration. It's an egotistical thing. It's like, boy, look at our student body under my leadership. Our kids really toe the line, or my kids are so from and yada yada.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then eventually,
something. Please don't misinterpret our listening audience. What I'm saying, I have nothing against kids. You do get kids that are very, very from in their hearts and in their behavior, and are and achieve wonderful Torah learning, and God bless them. If that's what they're about, Baruch Hashem. But you need to let kids who are not on that bench, let them know that as Jews, they are accepted and that they have their place in Yiddishkeit. Not everybody is a little tzaddik or tzedekis.
I think it's also the frustration of a lot of people that are just trying to live their standard life, and because of the fear that they have of not being knowledgeable in something, they give other people the power over them. You know what I mean? Where like I'm on a few like WhatsApp groups for rabbinical questions that people ask, and some of these questions I get, it's like, wow, are you an idiot? Are you trying to like not do your due diligence and do some research before you open up your mouth? Like one guy was like, what day is Yom Kippur? And they're like, that's not a question to ask on this forum. You can get a calendar.
What's the matter with asking that question? It's okay.
No, it's not okay, because that's waste of resources.
It's not. It's like,
Ema, stop and listen to me. Ema, please just listen to me before you jump down my throat and try to legitimize some other baloney cockamamie person. You're trying to be okay with it. If you're asking for what day a holiday is on a forum for rabbis to answer questions, that's not a rabbi question. You go into a calendar and look it up.
Maybe this person was a very uneducated Jew who didn't even own a Jewish calendar. So it's a very simple way to solve this.
Oh my God.
10th of Tishrei. And in this year, it's such and such in September.
So you have Google, you have a phone. You go on Google, you say, what day is Yom Kippur? Chabad.org. It is October such and such.
Maybe this guy's not even aware of Chabad.org.
If you're unaware of Chabad.org, but are aware of a WhatsApp group of from rabbis explaining different questions that should be that should be questioned, real complicated things. It's like, I have to go ahead and bring up this other point then for you then, if you're willing to just go ahead and be done the host for this one random idiot. The Rebbe was very big on people getting smicha. Why? So you shouldn't waste the rabbi's time excessively with questions. You should be able to understand certain things on your own. You gotta do the due diligence and figure it out on your own before you open up your mouth.
Wait a minute. I was at the Fabringen when the Rebbe said that too many people were relying on looking up their own information rather than going to the Rebbeim to answer questions. And he said people should rely more on going to the Rebbeim to ask questions. I was at the Fabringen when the Rebbe said that.
Well, I literally read it in various forum and was told by Rav Steinsaltz when I was getting my smicha of the reason why they started the smicha program in Lubavitch yeshivas after technically high school years in yeshiva. Why is everyone getting smicha? So they could be knowledgeable enough to ask the right question.
And I just have a lot of sympathy for people who are totally un-Jewishly educated, because I was there once upon a time, and I know what that's like. And if somebody has a question, there's no reason you can't just, instead of calling them names, just answer their question.
I didn't say anything. I'm talking to you about what happened. I didn't call him an idiot.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, good.
I'm just saying in general, it's a pretty stupid question to ask. It's a pretty stupid question to ask. I think you're going on extreme levels of damachaf for someone who's being a real idiot. And I think you have to maybe take a step back and realize they're just being an idiot. They need to stop and ask themselves what's going on.
Einstein once said, "There's no such thing as a stupid question."
Okay, Ima. Fantastic. I believe so. All right. Einstein also believed in marrying his cousin and plenty of other things that I don't think you
well,
agree
actually,
with.
out the halacha, there's nothing wrong in marrying a cousin.
God, this is the frustration I have. This is the real frustration. I try to have conversations.
Learning how
I'm trying
to deal with frustrations. Learn how to deal with it. Calm down.
That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing when you go ahead and tell someone to calm down, because it's silly and stupid. It's like, it's like this right here. I'm glad I'm recording. I am so happy I'm recording, because this is the example of my childhood, having these conversations with you, you missing the point, standing up for the wrong person, not understanding me, and then Dafka going out of your way to go ahead and then instigate me and say, when I'm getting upset, it's all my fault and it's all in my head. And I have it recorded now. It's all recorded. It's fantastic. I have it on record. That's gonna be you know what? I'm gonna go ahead. That's the title of this week's episode, on record. Fantastic. This is exactly what would happen all the time. This is exactly what would happen. I would bring up a point. I'd be frustrated about something, about somebody. You wouldn't stand up for me. You stand up for the other person. You try to make me think of their perspective, but unfortunately, sometimes that their perspective was wrong. And then I would get upset that you're not listening to me. And then you tell me it's all my fault for getting upset. And it's my fault for getting angry. It's my fault for having these emotions.
I hope you show this recording years and years now to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, so they can look at this and say, "Hey, lady, that's what you did to us."
Dafka, that's not what I'm going to do to them. Dafka, that's not what I'm going to do.
You'd be surprised how many people become their parents.
So you're like Bobby Rena and Zadie?
I might be probably in some respects, yeah.
In some respects, but not all. And I think certain things that you get focused on. I'm not gonna say scarred, because that sounds kind of pansy, but certain things that I'm just not going to definitely shy away from. Like, I'm out of my way not doing that. Just like you didn't go out of your way not to hit your kids, even though you did it sometimes. I'm gonna out of my way not make my kid hate himself for having emotions.
You can have emotions, but
No, Emma, we literally just recorded this. You can't back out. We have this on record. You literally went ahead and gaslit me into going ahead and getting upset and saying it's my fault for getting upset. This is exactly that vicious cycle that you created with all of us getting frustrated and annoyed. As soon as we're frustrated, you go ahead and say, "Why are you so upset? You should be calm and relax. I did nothing wrong." I have it on record. You can't back out. And that's fine. This is great radio, as you call it. It's great radio time.
Yeah, if it bleeds, it reads.
If it bleeds, it reads. If it bleeds, it reads. Yeah, so some people got worried because we were arguing at one point on our podcast, and someone got a little worried. I'm like, no, don't worry. We're amping up the situation for radio interest. But no, we're all fine. We're all good here.
We are family.
Oh my God, it's a long day. Long day.
Yeah, you mentioned something about like, there's there's a radio advertisement that
Yeah.
goes, "Are you becoming your parents?" And you're in some aspects, yeah, there are certain aspects where we do identify in certain. I mean, these are the people that raised us, that gave birth to us and raised us for the most part, and I think there are certain, you know, I mean, I just think there could be for certain aspects of the way our parents raised us that we do pick up, obviously.
Okay. So can you give me like an
I don't know.
example?
That's the problem. I can't. It's one of these.
It's
Well, there's one time your sister Hani, when she was a teenager, walked into the room and she said something. I forgot what she said. As soon as she said it, she put her hand over her mouth and in horror said, "I just sounded just like Ema." Screamed and ran out of the room.
okay. So can you give me just an inkling of some kind of example how you're like your parents? Just a little bit.
Do 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 do.
You got like a minute left.
Great.
We'll do it for next episode. Next episode. It's fine. It's good. I have it.
Thank
I have it
you.
marked. It's fantastic.
I know my spending habits are
Your spending
very much
habits.
like my parents.
Yeah, because they're poor as shit. You grew up poor. That's called That's called poor mentality. That's not a habit. That's just a
But it's
ingrained.
It's called being very frugal.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that you made sure. So is there anything else that like maybe you might not like about yourself that you somehow did as a parent that you were like?
No, I remember that I was reminiscing today with your sister how my mother was so economical that she used instant coffee. I like per coffee, but she used instant coffee, and when the instant coffee in the jar, like, oh.
Thank you for listening to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. Please comment and subscribe on our Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Instagram. I would greatly appreciate it, and my mother would too.